All right, you may have read a column or coverage of a column that's caused a few waves. It caused a few waves in the last 24, 48 hours. A column by Roger Douglas, the father, creator of Rogernomics, and our Minister of Finance for several years post the 1984 snap election. And one of the founders of the ACT party. And ACT is doing rather well this election, but I'll tell you whose vote they're not going to get. They're not going to get one of their founding fathers' vote. Roger Douglas says he won't vote ACT, and they've lost the plot, which has surprised a lot of people. And I thought we'd get Roger in to ask him where he thinks his old mates have gone wrong. G'day, Roger. Lovely to talk to you again.
Good morning. Nice to hear from you.
All right. Now, Roger, you have said ACT are a bunch of bunnies and you're not voting for them. Where have they gone wrong?
No, I haven't said I'm not voting for them. I said I'm a swing voter. There's no way I could vote for the Greens or for Labor. So therefore, at the moment, it comes down to National and ACT, and it isn't a great choice. If someone else comes along, they'll get my vote. Otherwise, I have to decide.
Look, can I tell you on this program, we've had an admission from Chris Trotter that he is likely to vote New Zealand first. Why don't you think of Winston as an option, Roger?
Oh, well, I watched Winston and his offsider mate on their regional development program waste $1 billion. I'd have to understand that he'd changed from that, honestly.
All right, but you'd put him in the mix.
Put him in the mix. Put everyone in the mix at the moment.
All right, and that's a smart thing for any voter to do, Roger. But it would be fair to say that the column suggested you feel that ACT and all political parties evolved past their founding fathers and everything else. But you feel they're not really what you envisaged when you got it started?
Well, that's true, but that's true of all the parties. Look, we're in real trouble in New Zealand. If you look at Treasury's predictions on a historic trend basis, we're going broke. There's no doubt about it, in the same way that a lot of other countries have gone. They're suggesting to us that by 2061 we'll have net debt of about $3,000 billion. In other words, we're bankrupt.
Yeah.
And the issue is, what are we going to do about it? And that's what my paper is saying. Look, we've had a pay-as-you-go system of financing government expenditure for the last 100 years, and it's not working. And we've got to move. And what I'm suggesting, we move from there to a savings-based system. And if we don't do that, more along the Singapore lines, it's a choice. We can go broke or we can turn it around. But it's going to take quite a lot to turn the ship around. Our debt in terms of unfunded liability is over $1,000 billion, and that's starting to weigh heavily on us.
Gosh, I think back 40 years, Roger. I think back. Who was it? Little Olivia, and you did a calculation on how much money she owed.
Oh yeah, well it's so much worse now. Well, I mean, last year, because we've got high inflation this year, our debt, our unfunded liabilities will go up by about $70 billion in 1 year. And, pay-as-you-go has been fine. Helen Clark enabled Helen Clark to have no-interest student loans and things of that nature and win an election, but someone's got to pay. And the people we're asking to pay are the most vulnerable people in the country. That is the young. And what we've done is load debt on the shoulders of the young, and it's going to cripple them, and it's just wrong. And no one's telling the truth. Look, there's an old saying in politics: if you want to help people, you tell them the truth. If you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. Yeah. And Clark, Key, Ardern, and now Hipkins, they're telling them what people want to hear. They poll.
Not the tough truth.
And not the tough truth. And it's about time someone told them the tough truth. And the problem is ACT has joined the club. Their latest publication or economic publication was frankly almost as bad as the Greens and Labor.
They seem to have, Roger, they seem to have identified this sort of free speech issue, kind of the transgender issue and the co-governance issue, as fertile ground for getting electoral support, which is what political parties survive on. And maybe it's not that they disagree with your concern about our levels of debt and the like, but maybe they've figured we can't do anything about that until we get a fair hunk of support, and there are other ways to get that support at the ballot box.
Well, look, they're playing politics there like everyone else.
Yeah.
But it's not that I have put my finger on. I'm worried about, what their some of their economic policies are. I mean, the fact that they are in favour of bracket creep remaining in place is just, in my view, ridiculous. And so far from where ACT started, it doesn't matter. And there's a couple of other things which are equally as bad.
Well, Roger, funnily enough, tax and tax distribution has become a little bit of an issue, though Labor has completely thrown up its hands and surrendered on that.
My paper points out what's wrong and the trouble we've got ourselves into over the last 25 years, including a massive unfunded liability debt of about $1,200 billion, over $1 trillion. But it also points out what we should be and about it. I mean, I'm not just having a go at everyone.
Well, look, someone's asked, and seeing we've got you here, and seeing we've got through technology interaction, someone says, could he explain what an unfunded liability is to the person in the street?
An unfunded, yes. If we go back, take superannuation for example, there is a promise and a contract. Currently, the people pay taxes in order that those who are retired can get paid superannuation and have health care in retirement, and that's the contract. And if you like, that's where the unfunded liability takes place, because we're not putting any money aside, and we should be putting money aside in order to meet that liability. Well, I mean, if I'm Fletcher's and I have a superannuation policy, each year I have to put money aside in order to meet those obligations. And we're not putting money aside as a government.
I get what you're saying. So it'd be like running a company super scheme where you never build out a fund to fund that superannuation scheme. You just pull it out of the existing workers and play it to the ex-workers.
Yeah, well, well, that would work, wouldn't it? Yeah. And if Fletcher's didn't put the money aside in that case, their directors and their chief executive and senior people would end up in jail for fraud.
Yeah.
And what we've got is a fraudulent scheme, a Ponzi scheme, if you like, that the government is running. And the problem with it is that it's coming home to roost, because what's happening is that we're getting to the situation where we've got fewer workers and more retired people. And we ought to be dealing with it. This is something that I've been on about for 50 years. I mean, I introduced a private member's bill when I was only in Parliament 2.5 years to ensure that everyone had super. If that had, and then as a government the next year we put it in place. But if that had remained in place, had Muldoon not got rid of it, people would be retiring with well over $1 million today. And, if we want to commit suicide, we will. And I guess I'm not tribal in the sense. The only thing that's important to me is what I believe, and I'm prepared to say it, is good for New Zealand. Now, some people will say, Mike, it sort of remind me, sorry, I'm jumping, but I used to go and see Mike Moore quite regularly when he wasn't well, and we'd argue and we'd agree on something, and I'd say to Mike, how the hell can you vote Labor if that's the way you think? And he says, I'm tribal, Roger. I'm tribal, my party, right or wrong. And that's not what it's about. It's about New Zealand, for God's sake.
All right. Look, why we've got you here, Roger, and I think your superannuation argument is compelling, is very compelling. What about tax? What about the tax burden, which appears for some on the left to be a big issue this election, but clearly Chris Hipkins has decided they don't want to go there. You, of course, famously advocated a flat income tax of, 23-25%. Yeah. And it was that proposal which really led to your falling out with David Longy.
Not really.
Oh,
no,
really?
Not really. Attached to this paper is really the reasons. It's an appendix 1 of why I fell out with David much more over what we were going to do about health and education. I believe that a centralised government model of education and healthcare would never deliver what people needed, and I was right on that. I mean, what I suggested, a model along the lines of Singapore may or may not have worked. But one thing is for sure, the present system is not working, and that's part of my paper to do something about that.
Yeah. Okay, so what would you do with tax right now? Do you think we have an unfair income tax system? Should we tax the wealthy, tax the rich?
Well, the problem is that politicians' thinking is about 1 year ahead, and at the moment it's only 3 months ahead, and that's never going to solve it. If we're going to solve taxes, falls out of what you spend. Tax is all about spending. What you spend, you have to get
in somewhere. You got to have income.
Raise it in tax. Now, what I believe and what this paper is suggesting is that we really take a 30-year view on this, and that people save for their own retirement. It would take 35 years, but in 35 years, everyone would have sufficient money to look after themselves. It would be dollars a day. They'd have $3 million. They can look after their own healthcare, look after their own super, and we'd go from there. But it's a slow grind. So what I'm saying is everyone starts to save like you do in Fletcher's, have $6,000 a year. You reduce the tax by the 6,000, and people save that, and ultimately, and in those 35 years actually, they get what they've saved plus the government make it up to ensure that they get at least what they're getting now, which Treasury is saying cut by 30% over the next 20 years, and ACT agrees with them. And
you don't?
I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, it is necessary if we stay where we are. Don't get me wrong. We're going broke. So we're going to have to do something about it. Yeah. So we actually bite the bullet and think long term, which means I'm not advocating at this point of time lowering the tax rate for the high income.
Yeah.
Because in the end of the day, the high income will be the big winners. Because if you're not paying much tax, well, you can't reduce it. I would say, and I say this in my paper, in 35 years, and it's gradual, people would retire with enough money to look after their own super.
Yeah.
After 45, they look after their own healthcare as well. And tax would be 10 cents. Personal tax would be the top rate. It'd be a flat rate of 10. GST would be 10, and corporate tax 10.
Yeah. Okay. Now, where can people have a look at your paper, Roger?
Well, if they send me an email, I'm sending it out in the next 2 or 3 days. I've sent you a copy.
Okay, so I'll have a read. I get a lot of email, Sir Roger.
Yeah.
It's so old school. I'll email it to you. Where's your website? Where's your TikTok account? Where's your Instagram, Roger?
Listen. I'm lucky to be able to do anything these days. At 85, I reckon I should. Some people would say I should have stopped talking, years ago. But
yeah.
But
well, Roger, look, the thing is, it's good to talk to you and clarify this, because of course our incredibly good and accurate mainstream news media have just jumped on the headline that you hate ACT and you're not voting ACT. But of course, that's a misrepresentation of what's happening, isn't it?
It's a total misrepresentation. I am unhappy with aspects of what ACT is doing, and particularly what they're saying about welfare and tax. I think they're wrong, but that's not my motivation. My motivation is that New Zealand's in a mess. Treasury say we're going broke, and if people want to look at that, they can look at Treasury's long-term fiscal forecast for 2021 to 2061. It's up on the Treasury website. It's a fairly easy read. It's 60 pages, but all they're saying in nice terms, if we stay where we are, we're going broke. Treasury come up with their solution, which I don't agree with. What they're saying, we increase personal tax, we increase GST, we increase all the taxes, and we cut the benefits over time. They don't say you actually cut it.
Hey, Roger, do you want to get back into politics? Because you would now be allowed to identify as a 40-year-old and start all over again.
You reckon?
Yeah.
I think I'm a bit old, but I'll tell you what, if there's people out there who want to see the country move from a pay-as-you-go system, which is sending us broke, to a savings-based program where people retire with a large amount of money and have accounts to look after, so they can look after their own health care and their children's education, then I'm very happy to help, and I'll give them all my writings on those issues. Roger,
always a pleasure, my friend. Glad to hear you're well and still swinging, as they say. That is Sir Roger Douglas, former Finance Minister, one of the founders of the ACT Party, clearing up some of the mainstream media BS coverage and just saying we are going broke. We should be building up our assets and trusting people to make good decisions themselves. What do you think? What a blast from the past that was.